So February is an important month on this channel, mostly because it's my birthday month, but a big portion is because it's Black History Month. And for me, Black history and Black representation is a big important thing for me. So usually every month on Black History Month, I try to sit down and take a Black character from comic books that I feel like is maybe underrepresented, or maybe just because they're my favorite character, and talk about them and give reasoning as to why I think you guys should check them out. My plan for this month was to cover the character by the name of Icon. A lot of people may look at him as just like a Black version of Superman, but there's a lot more to him than that. And I sat down and attempted to read all 42 issues of his original run. I want to sit down and tell you guys a little bit of what I like about this character, and honestly why this character and his story makes me love Milestone Media a lot more than I already did. And it's going to make me go down this rabbit hole of reading and checking out and maybe doing a video on every Milestone character IP that I can find that I really enjoy. So without further ado, let's talk about the character, Icon.
You're now watching The Captain.
So first of all, before we get into the story, I want to talk about the people that made this book. This book is written by Dwayne McDuffie, the guy that you all know. I've talked about him before on the channel. He's a big proponent in the creation and writing to a lot of the dope animated universe that DC has had. And he's just been a great writer that has done generational things in a lot of different aspects. We have MD Bright, who's a penciler for this story, Mike Gustovich, who's the inker for this, and letters by Steve Dutro, Raquel Minsek, I'm butchering names, I'm so sorry, James Sherman, and colors by Noel Giddings. Great list of names to work in this book, but I want to spin the block going back to Dwayne McDuffie for a second. As a lot of you know, I'm a big fan of Dwayne McDuffie for a lot of the work he's done on the DC animated universe. I think that was, like, for me at least, a big introduction for me into the DC comic universe. I started watching a lot of the shows first and foremost, like the Batman, the animated series, but there's a series that really, you know, resonated with me and made me pay a lot of significant attention, and that was the Static Shock television show that was based on the character Static from Milestone Media. Static as a character for me in that show was so amazing because he was someone who represented me as a Black boy at that point in time. For a very long time at that point, I'd only seen people that looked like me on television, especially within superhero content, very sparingly. I think Cyborg from the Teen Titans was another character I enjoyed that I saw, but Static was the first time I saw a character that truly resonated with me. He was this superhero with these cool electrical powers, but more than that, he was a nerdy kid with a family that really preached good ethics and morals to him. Like, honestly, I felt like Static was a character who's a mirror image to me in a lot of different ways, which is why I did my own video on him, which you can, you know, find on the channel somewhere here. But finding out that Dwayne McDuffie was a big proponent around that show being created and the different aspects of that show, it made me do a lot of research into all the different things that he'd been a part of. And again, at the end of all that research, I just found to have a lot of respect for Dwayne McDuffie. That being said, I can say that I've read a lot of comics that Dwayne McDuffie has written. In reading this story, this really makes me respect Dwayne McDuffie in a way that I didn't even think I could before. This story tackles a lot of tough conversations and topics that I don't expect any comic book even today to tackle too often, let alone a comic back then. And honestly, that shouldn't surprise me because I think I talked about it in my Static video a while back. That show tackled very tough subject matter. So it only makes sense that Dwayne McDuffie being a part of this book and that show, that subject matter that's really difficult to kind of go through, is something that isn't foreign to Dwayne McDuffie and how he goes about writing things. And, you know, me saying that, I'm sure you're wondering what I'm talking about. Well, first and foremost, this book tackles a lot of ideas around racism and a lot of ideals around how us as people can also have some sort of self-internalized racism. At least there's allegories to it in my mind. Beyond that, you have topics very early on in the story where you're looking at teen pregnancy and how teen pregnancy, especially for Black women at that point in time, are handled, and how these girls go through this thought process of what they're going to do when they have these children or when they just found to be pregnant as a whole. This subject matter is some that's not foreign to Milestone Media as a whole, because to my knowledge from what I researched, it seems like Milestone Media has tackled different things like this, not just Icon, but in every other Milestone character like book that they created, from Static to the Blood Syndicate to Hardware, etc., etc. So with me saying all that, let's dive into some of this story that I'm talking about here. So who is Icon? I'm sure you're asking, what is the whole deal with him? Well, on the surface, he looks like another version of Superman. When you're used to watching stuff like The Boys or Invincible, you're used to seeing evil versions of Superman or just different versions of Superman that may be good when you're looking at characters like Sentry or even Hyperion. There's a million different clones of Superman, and hell, there's even some within DC Universe itself when you're looking at some characters like Shazam. But Icon, in my opinion, is different than all those other characters. Yes, on a surface level, he has a lot of the different things that those characters talk about, but there's a lot of interesting stuff within this character as a whole that I think makes makes him a little bit more interesting than all those other characters combined, for me at least. That's just speaking on who he is as the character, not even speaking to his design, because the design for the character is dope. A lot of the design work for this character is kind of reminiscent in my mind to like Spawn, with like how Icon's cape is like bigger than life and almost a character in itself, and how his design is very imposing and menacing, but he's also a very strong, gentle character at the same time. It's dope. But without further ado, let's talk about what makes Icon so dope. So the story starts in 1839, where you're seeing this spaceship essentially malfunction, and all these different aliens on it are trying to escape, and things are exploding. And there's one pod that seems to escape from this ship, and this pod seems to crash land on Earth in the middle of a cotton field almost. So you're on a plantation to some extent. So with this big metal sphere crash landing on Earth, what you would expect to happen happens. The slaves nearby wake up, and one woman in particular walks over to the field and sees this metal ball in the middle of the ground, and she does probably the more stupid thing that most people would do in the situation, is touch it. In her touching it, you see it reacts very weirdly. The alien that was inside that had escaped is like transformed from his alien form into this small black baby. This baby is then picked up by this woman, and as you would expect, like most amazing black women do, they took this small child that was defenseless and, seemingly raised it to be her own. After that, we then moved from 1893 into what was then present day 1993, and we're introduced to the adult version of that baby, who goes by the name of Augustus Freeman now. And you kind of see him daydreaming, thinking about the experiences of him crash landing there, and thinking about what seemingly his mother, essentially, as time goes on. And we find out that he is a big businessman. He's a man of big business. He seems to be a lawyer of some sort, at least early in this story, and he is rushed off to this meeting with one of his partners, well, with his partner, Saul, business partner, not romantic partner. Had to clarify that real quick. And I want y'all to understand that this story takes place in the 90s. You're gonna have a lot of references and different things that are gonna be talking about celebrities or politicians that are big at that point in time. One of which that we hear about early on in the book, Rush Limbaugh. So keep that in mind as we go through this entire story here. Getting back into the story, we're seeing Augustus speak with his business partner Saul, and he's bringing up this interaction he had with this young girl recently who was, in his words, impoverished, impassioned, and angry, and mentions how she sees the world differently than he does. He continues on to say that this character sounds a great deal like Estelle did, which at least at this point I'm not sure who Estelle was. He then goes on to talk about how this young woman told him that he has a responsibility to help people, and as you would expect, his business partner brings up the whole kind of cold idea that they're lawyers and their whole job every day is to help people when they're not screwing them over. But this conversation seems to really stick around in Augustus's mind and make him believe that he could possibly do more to even help people. We're then introduced to a brand new character in the story, a character by the name of Raquel. Raquel, as told in the panel that she's introduced, is a young 15-year-old girl who is passionate about one day being a writer. And it seems like she's about to get into some trouble here, because in the next page over, we're showcased that she's kind of in a car with a bunch of different people that are up to no good for the most part, because they are kind of scheming and talking about how at this point, cops are all in a tizzy and moving to one part of the city to go stop the event called the Big Bang. And while the cops are handling that, that means they can go raid all the rich people in the suburbs without having to worry about cops coming to stop them, essentially. Now, I want to pause here to kind of remind you guys on what the Big Bang is. If you guys are familiar with the Static Shock TV show to any extent, you're aware of what it is for the most part. It is this big gang war, essentially, that took place within Dakota. And again, keep in mind that this whole story and all the stories in Milestone, for the most part, take place in Dakota, in the Dakota verse. And we're showing that it's just a big gang war where it's all the biggest gangs within Dakota coming together in one location to fight it out. And the police show up to try to break up this whole thing with experimental tear gas or mustard gas or however you want, whatever kind of gas it is. Experimental gas to try to break everybody up, and that leads to what is then called the Big Bang, where a lot of the gang members there die, but the people that make it out leave with super powers and they become metas essentially. So that's how we get characters like Static or the Blood Syndicate getting all their abilities. Now, going back into this story, it's taking place during the Big Bang. So they're preparing to go rob some rich white folks while the cops are all handling something else, which, big brain activities, I get it. But one thing that's made very apparent as they're planning to go rob these rich white people is that Raquel isn't like the rest of the people in the car. Raquel says she's not a thief, so inherently she's not a bad person and she's not looking to commit crimes or take advantage of the situation. She just wants to write for the most part. But she's eventually convinced into it out of the prospects of them stealing enough money that they can get her a typewriter. And she then talks about, quick remark that Toni Morrison, one of her idols in writing, probably has a typewriter. So she then goes along with the whole scheme because You can't be a professional writer without a typewriter. Come on now. So as they pull up to this massive house, we then, they're doing a criminal thing. They're taking out the alarms, they're breaking into the house, and they're looking around for stuff to steal. Now, I want to really focus on a particular moment in this whole scenario because Raquel really makes note of how she's looking around this house and all the different things that are in the home. And she makes note that whoever lived here had more than just money. They had knowledge, because she saw all these books that was in this massive study and talked about how this knowledge was also history. And Raquel talks about how she wanted all this knowledge more than anything she had ever wanted in her life. So again, this so far shows a lot of depth into this character and really makes me interested to see who she is as a person as time goes on. So as they're rummaging through all the stuff, trying to find things to steal, we then find out that there's someone that lives in this home. And this person is none other than Augustus Freeman, the person that we saw in the beginning of the story. The kids assume, as most people would assume, especially during this point in time, that the black man that is living in this big mansion is the butler in the home, and letting him know that, hey bro, you getting shot is not worth you protecting all this stuff in this house. Essentially telling them to get lost so they can finish robbing the place. And Augustus makes it very clear to them that they're wrong on several accounts, that he is the owner of this home and he doesn't intend on letting them take any of his stuff. This then leads up into this whole thing where the kids shoot this man right in the chest, and he essentially rises up like the fucking Undertaker after getting shot point blank in the chest with a revolver. Now, again, doing the smart thing that most people would do in this situation, they run, because if you shot this dude point blank in the chest, he's probably not the type of person to mess with. Augustus, though, he gives chase and he hawks all these kids down and essentially starts snatching them up one by one and flying away with them to put them down in one location, and kind of lets them know that he's had enough of all this BS. Like, we cut it out. Y'all are making enough mess. I am not gonna make any of this stuff public because I don't want to let people know that I'm essentially flying around and doing supernatural stuff. And he lets them know that in the future, quote unquote, they need to comport themselves like citizens and not common thugs, and lets them know that they want something, they need to pay for it, and they can't afford to pay for it, they need to work for it, and lets them know that their behavior reflects very poorly on our people and yourselves. And I want to take another pause here. This is the first aspect of this series that I enjoy more than any other, because this sets up the main character of the story, being Augustus Freeman, being Icon, if you haven't figured it out by this point, to be a character that has a very interesting perspective. He is this alien who crash landed on Earth, who grew up during the times of chattel slavery all the way up into the 1990s. And he has a very interesting perspective. A very interesting perspective that from a very, I guess, logical alien standpoint would make sense in the way that he views black people, because he spits off a lot of rhetoric that you only hear from white men who don't understand the nuances of culture and what has happened to people that are black historically, and how a lot of the ways that different things went from redlining to Jim Crow laws kept black people from doing certain things. Because he's speaking to these broke, poor, impoverished children and looking at them as nothing other than common thugs, and is not taking into account their situation and how they would have gotten there. Because due to certain liberties or advances that he had, being an alien who probably had a more heightened intelligence than other people, he was able, even during slavery, to work towards freedom and towards garnering a significant amount of wealth that only somebody could dream of at that point in time if they weren't an athlete or a musician or some form of entertainer. And it seems as though because he was able to pull himself up by his proverbial bootstraps, that he now expects that same behavior from every other black person, kind of negating the idea of the pre-created conditions and the pre-established laws and things of that nature that kept all black people from attaining that certain level of wealth. He lacks the understanding that there are systemic issues that cause for these different things that happen. And that is what I find perfect about this character, is because before I even read too far into this run, I realized that this was his growth. This is where he was going to grow. If you're a fan of good writing in any form or fashion, you'll understand that there is this whole concept of growth within a character. Characters need to have a place in the beginning of a story to start and have a destination that ends with them having some kind of a roller coaster of an arc. They need to grow and shrink as a character until they get to this final point to where they change. Now, that change doesn't always need to be good. It could be them growing from a good person to a villain. It could go from them being a villain to a good person, but at the end of the day, this character needs to change. And in my mind, I saw the arc that this proverbial black man was going to go on. Someone who is very much so cynical in how he sees the world is going to, throughout the course of his entire journey as a hero, see underlying details that make the world, or at least the country, what it was at that point in time. He's going to see things for what they are. And it's going to take away these pair of rose-tinted glasses that he sees the world through. And I want to go back into the story for a second to really reinforce this idea. Because later on in the issue, we see Raquel go back to the mansion to speak with this man. She comes back with this idea and a sketch that they can be a superhero duo. She is the one one that proposes the idea of him being Icon and her being the Rocket, this superhero team. She tells him that he should be a superhero and set an example for people like you. See, Raquel was inspired by the interaction that she had with Augustus in that moment in time of the robbery, because although he was spitting a lot of rhetoric, she saw a vision. She says that he should be a superhero and set an example for people like he did for her and her friends, trying to lead people down the right path. She also brings up the ideal that she'd be his sidekick that goes by the name of Rocket, and she'd be there just so he never forgot why he was doing the hero thing and why he was being an icon for other people. He then rebuttals with the sentiment of people don't really need an example, that if you're not doing well, you haven't worked hard enough, and if you want a better life, you shouldn't look for examples of what to do. You should pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. Again, going back into this really tired old discussion point. And Raquel responds in a way that I find absolutely genius. She says, it's a lot easier to pull yourself up by your bootstraps if you already know how to fly. And those few words not only rang true and left an impact on me as a reader, but it apparently left a lot of impact on Augustus himself. Because apparently later on, he then drops off to Raquel a superhero costume with a superpowered belt that gives her superpowered abilities. Again, I'm just saying superpowered a million times over, my bad. He then tells her that in 3 weeks, they need to meet up so they can begin their superhero excursions, essentially. And as we're getting to that point, we're seeing Augustus walk through what is essentially the hood, and he's thinking to himself. He's thinking to himself how the words of Raquel really reminded him a lot of this wife that he had in the past that shared a lot of similar sentiments, but he dismissed those thoughts initially. Now he questions how they could live like this, they being Black people, his people. He thinks, how could I let them live like this? He says that he pretended that those who suffer under such conditions, like being poor or broke, must have brought those conditions upon themselves. And while these broke and poor people live without hope, he was living a lie. He thinks to himself how a lot of the riots within the city at that point provided a lot of hopelessness for the people there, and that he planned to provide an example of the contrary. Right after that thought, he finally meets up with Raquel to start their journey, and she wants him to hear this quote that she was reading. The quote goes a little like this: "The Negro race, like all races, is going to be saved by its exceptional men. It is the problem of developing the best of this race that they may guide the mass away from the contamination and death of the worst in their own and other races." A quote by the infamous W.E.B. Du Bois. Again, this quote really just showing how Dwayne McDuffie in this moment is trying to make the people that are reading this understand that this isn't just going to be a typical hero saves the city story, but it's going to be a story in which the person who represents this ideal of being an icon and being a leader for his people is going to not only save the city and the world, but he's also going to look to be a leader and save his own people. And I think that's the best way to write a character like Icon. When you're looking at these characters who are meant to be beacons of the greater society and communities around them, there's something special about them. And when I say that, I'm looking at a character like Captain America. As much as he annoys me as a character from the MCU side of things, when you're looking at him from the comics, he's a very interesting character. From the aspect that when Cap was first created, he was essentially World War II propaganda. But when you're moving into more of the more modern stories that showcase him, you're seeing that he is looking at the American government in the ways that he saw through propaganda, in which they were these amazing country and they were going about, healing the world and being big brothers and protectors of the world. This country and this government that are both flawed, and understanding that his viewpoint on what this stuff was before was wrong, and that he needs to go about changing so that he can become the best version of himself and be a better example, because the example he was before wasn't a good one. It was a one that was lived in falsehood and ideations that aren't really accurate. Now, all that being said, this run and this character left a remarkable impression on me, and I'm so happy that I decided to go back and read a lot of this original Dakotaverse stuff. Because I think, like most people, my only experience to Milestone Media was static. It was anything static, and everything the Static Shock show had to offer, that was the extent of my knowledge of it. As I'm speaking, I've only really read like 24-ish issues of this 42-issue run, so I'm a little bit over halfway through everything. But one thing I definitely want to do is not only finish this series off, but go back and read the original stories from all the other characters that Milestone put out. When I'm looking at things like the Blood Syndicate, or looking at maybe some original Static stuff, or even going back to look at stuff from a hardware side of things, and really just seeing all the different subject matter and how Milestone Media as a whole tackle this stuff. And I'd encourage you as a viewer to go do the same. And if you want to do this, I highly encourage you guys to go buy the compendiums that feature all these stories within these big, essentially omnibuses that are available to buy now. I went to my LCS and asked the people that ran the shop, shop that, hey, if you don't have this in store, please order this for me so I can buy this and read all this stuff in one place. So please support Milestone Media by doing this. You guys maybe don't have the money to buy all the compendiums at once. Maybe you guys don't have the money to go buy single issues right now, but please, in some form or fashion, through your dollar, support Milestone Media. Milestone Media is making a return with DC at the time of making this video earlier on in February, where they're going to drop the Dakota Instant, which is going to be coming out February 25th, really showcasing a lot of how they're going to reintroduce the Dakota verse into the DC universe for the most part. This being said, I have some insider information that probably is obvious for a lot of you who are fans of comics, that if this book doesn't sell well, then they're not going to produce anything Milestone related in DC for probably like 2-ish years, because I think a lot of people don't understand how comic book sales go. If you want a ongoing series to continue, or a series to continue as a whole, you have to pre-order books, because what happens is when you buy a book off a shelf, those numbers and those sales from just buying it off the shelf don't go back directly to Marvel or DC. Your shop that you're getting a book from makes a bulk order from Marvel or DC, letting them know like, hey, I want this amount of books because I believe that I can sell this books in my store and these are going to sell well. If they're consistently buying low amounts of these books in their shops, it doesn't matter if all the books on the wall sell out. If they're not ordering more directly from Marvel and DC, they're not going to have the numbers to showcase that this book is doing well and people are fans of this book. We need to continue to make this book. They're going to see that sales low, so they're going to discontinue these books immediately. So even if the book is well received and people are enjoying it, Marvel and DC are just moving along the same belief that it's not, so they're going to get rid of it. And a lot of these orders that need to happen have to happen through pre-order. So that means you need to set up a pull box with your local comic book shop, allowing you to say to them, hey, I know this book is coming out soon, or I heard it's coming out soon. Could you please reserve this issue for me so that when it comes out, I have it waiting on me so I can come buy it whenever I please. And your shop will have those numbers and say, hey, all right, this book's coming out. We have however many orders already pre-ordered. We'll order that and some for people that want to buy it in store here. So then that goes into supporting your local book. So please support books that you want to see succeed, especially if you're talking about books that center Black characters or that were written by Black people. I highly encourage you to do that, because Milestone Media is one of those that definitely deserves that effort. So again, this is all I have to say about Icon as of now. And I'm probably going to come back and do more videos on these characters within Milestone Media, like a Hardware or a Blood Syndicate. Hell, probably maybe another Static video at some point in time. I don't know. So if you guys enjoyed this video, it means you liked it. So do me a favor and like the video and subscribe to the channel to be updated on everything that I drop going forward. And let me know in the comment section below, were you familiar with who Icon was as a character? Are you someone who just didn't tap in with Milestone at a certain point like myself, or have you been a long-time fan? I'd love to know what you think in the comment section below. And again, if you guys want to support me further than just liking the video or even subscribing to the channel, you can check out my own book that I wrote and produced myself called Reaper. This is a book that you guys can find in the description below, where you can buy issue 1 on echelongraphicnovels.com, as well as support the Kickstarter for issue 2 that is currently on the way soon. So with all that being said, y'all, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for giving me your time to let me talk about Icon and my experiences reading his books. But y'all, more than anything else, I want you to remember, forever and always,
You're now watching the Captain.
and I'll see you guys next time. Be good, people.